So I want to go over writing the body of a persuasive essay. And for this one, I'm going to demonstrate how you need to look at both sides of an issue in order to make your points come across the strongest. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and use the actual topic that we used for the Foursquare argument chart. So my topic is going to be why the Lord of the Rings is better than the Twilight Saga. Now, I'm not meaning to offend any Twilight fans out there, but I just wanted to pick something that I thought I could actually argue. Now, for this essay, my thesis statement is going to be, although fans of both franchises are equally committed to them, the Lord of the Rings is a much better series in terms of story, character, and overall message than the Twilight Saga. Alright, so that is the thesis statement that I'm going to use for this particular essay. A couple of things I want you to take note of. First of all, notice that I have my topic, Lord of the Rings and Twilight. I have the idea that one is better than the other, so I'm taking a definite stand. And then I have included in my thesis statement my 3 points of comparison. So I'm going to compare these in terms of story, character, and message. And your thesis statement needs to include all of your major points in such a way that you kind of basically you're telling the audience what are you going to tell them about. You don't need to go into the explanation in your thesis statement. You're going to explain in your body paragraphs. So don't start jumping into what story is, what character is, and what the message is. So I'm going to start with the body paragraphs. I'm not going to start with the introduction. I do have an introduction written for this, but I wanted to show you how you can just start straight from where you are. If you don't have an introduction written yet, that's fine. Don't even worry about trying to write an introduction until you've actually written out your body paragraphs. That way you can tailor your introduction to what you actually wrote in your body paragraphs. This way if something changes, you don't have to go back and change your whole introduction. I'm also not going to write a conclusion quite yet. I'm going to work on that, and then I'll post a separate video showing how I write a conclusion. So to start off with, I'm just going to actually start with the word first. A lot of people find the word first to be boring, but if it's your first point, there's no reason to get super complex with this. Later on, if you think you don't really like the word first as a way of starting your first paragraph, then you can change it later. Nothing that you do in here is going to be permanent. Remember, nothing that we're writing here is eternal. Everything can be changed, adapted, revised, depending upon what we notice. So I'm going to start off with the word first, and I'm going to start with my first point. Now, I already pointed out that my first point is about the story of Lord of the Rings. So that's what I'm going to write. Now, this first point, that the Lord of the Rings provides an epic story of good versus evil, you may recognize from my Foursquare argument chart. I wanted to make sure that I started off from there. Now I'm going to diverge pretty far from the actual chart that we made in class, but that's okay because that's the whole point of the chart is that you do some pre-writing ahead of time, and things are going to change. You're going to change what you actually do as you write. So why is this an epic story? Well, an epic story implies that it's big. It needs to be bigger than just the characters that are portrayed in it. So basically what we have here is that the very fate of Middle-earth is at stake. And one of the things they talk about is the free peoples of Middle-earth versus those people that are under the dominion of Sauron, or later those people that are under the dominion of Saruman, the evil wizard who betrays Gandalf. And so I'm going to start off with that question. will it remain a land of free people, or will it be subjected to slavery under a dark lord? Just so you can see what I'm doing, first of all, I'm asking a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting the reader to actually answer the question directly to me. I'm bringing this up as this is the question that we're going to consider. The other thing, I use the term Dark Lord just to kind of, that way I didn't have to write Sauron and Saruman. Sometimes you can go ahead and be a little bit vague so that you don't have to confuse the reader. Now, that's my topic sentence. First, in terms of story, The Lord of the Rings provides an epic story of good versus evil. That's what my paragraph is going to be about. Everything from here on is going to be an explanation of that topic sentence. So how does The Lord of the Rings provide an epic story? Well, first of all, I mentioned that the fate of Middle-earth is at stake, and Middle-earth is a huge area. It's an entire continent, and there's even more of the world, but this is the major part of the world. So Middle-earth is very important. It's very big. From the beginning of the series, The Lord of the Rings establishes a very clear struggle that will affect an entire continent and even lands beyond. That's essentially the definition of, when you're saying something is epic, it means it's really big, and so that's where I'm establishing the bigness of what I'm talking about. Now, I have to admit, I haven't seen, I've seen the first Twilight movie, and I don't really remember a whole lot about it, so this is going to sound a little bit funky, but my understanding of the story is that it pretty much all takes place in the same general area, a small area of Washington State. So I'm going to use that as my contrast point, so that in contrast, the stakes in the Twilight Saga are never much higher than the personal lives of the main characters. When I talked to my students about the Twilight Saga, most of them were saying that it was a romance story, and they mentioned Bella, Edward, Jacob. I think one mentioned that there's another character that I don't really remember her name. But you get, it sticks with those three characters, and those are pretty much what people care about. And so I'm kind of basing this on that idea that people really just care about these small number of people in this particular story. And so it's just their personal lives. So it's important for them, and this is where I'm going to give a concession to the other side. A concession means I'm going to grant them a point. So I'm going to say, granted for Bella, Edward, and Jacob, the outcome of events may be very important. And I want to acknowledge that. I mean, they are important events when people are talking about love and death and life and having babies and all this different stuff that goes along with it and who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Those are important questions for that person, but it doesn't fit the definition of epic. Epic has to go beyond the personal to something much larger than that. And so I wanted to make sure that I point out that yes, Twilight's important in small terms, but in terms of like the world as a whole, I don't think Washington, D.C., for example, or the President of the United States is going to get involved in Bella and Edward's love affair, or that he's even going to be concerned with it. And so I'm going to say the issues before them are not likely to affect people outside of the small town where the action takes place. Now I did notice as I was typing that I have a little bit of an issue here, so I'm going to change. I'm going to add the word, let's see, granted for Bella, Edward, and Jacob, the outcome of events may be very important. I'm going to add, however, as a transition word. I need a transition to say that I'm making a counterpoint, so I'm going to add a transition word for however. On the other hand, so there's another transition phrase that I can use to show that I'm going back to my point. In The Lord of the Rings, the actions of even the smallest characters, such as the hobbits, affect not only their homes, but the whole of Middle Earth. And I'm thinking primarily again of the hobbits because they're such small characters, you know, they're personal characters, just like Bella and Edward and Jacob may even be considered to be personal characters with us, you know. Certainly Bella is presented as being a very ordinary, kind of her point is that she's an ordinary girl. And so I'm going to go ahead and add that in there just to show that I'm not saying that you can't have ordinary people and have them do important things. It's just that I feel like the information in Twilight, or the story in Twilight, never gets to be that important to anybody besides the people directly involved in it.